12 Democratic state attorneys general sent letters to the CEOs of Facebook and Twitter on Wednesday, urging them to curb misinformation relating to coronavirus vaccines. The attorneys general say the social media companies should enforce rules against anti-vaccine propaganda and do more to crack down on accounts spreading false information on vaccines. The AGs also cited data from a recent report published by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which says, quote, anti-vaccine activists on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter reach more than 59 million followers, making these the largest and most important social media platforms for anti-vaxxers. This comes just one day ahead of a congressional hearing in which Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, and Google CEO Sundar Pichai are expected to testify on misinformation. For more on all of this, I want to bring in Imran Ahmed. He is the founder and CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Good to see you again, Imran. Your report mentions that 12 individuals are responsible for around 2/3 of anti-vaccine content on social media platforms. Who are these people?
Well, they're not just individuals, and it's good to see you again, Lana. These are individuals who have behind them large companies that they themselves run, which pump out misinformation with the aim of persuading people not to follow the clinical guidance and to instead buy their false cures or to buy access to the information that they claim is the truth about coronavirus and about vaccines. But in fact, that content has the potential of harming human life, not just the individuals themselves, but more cruelly, the people they love and our communities as a whole.
Last week, you briefed House Democrats on the dangers of vaccine misinformation, particularly on social media platforms. What came out of that meeting, and what are your suggestions for regulating big tech?
Well, there's this incredible sense of frustration that social media platforms, thanks to the way the law is constructed, don't just get to set their own rules. They are judge, jury, and executioner. And there is no oversight of that decision-making. So whereas they occasionally take action in a high-profile way, recently Facebook did that with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for example, who is pumping out propaganda targeting African-American communities specifically. They failed to do so on Instagram, which Facebook owns itself. So what we see is inconsistent application of the rules and a complete failure to act against the bulk, against the majority of the misinformation out there, which we can trace back to these 12 individuals, the disinformation dozen, as we've dubbed them.
That's very interesting, the difference between Facebook posts and Instagram when it's all the same parent company. And in response to the letters from the attorneys general we referenced earlier, Facebook said, quote, we've updated our policies to remove millions of pieces of misinformation about COVID-19 and vaccines from Facebook and Instagram. It goes on to say, quote, we've also labeled more than 167 million pieces of COVID-19 content rated false by our fact-checking partners, and now are rolling out labels to any post that discusses vaccines. So what do you make of Facebook's strategy here?
Well, their strategy appears to be to shove out statistics they sound like big numbers, and everyone loves a big number. But the problem is that we have found that still the total universe of followers of these anti-vaxxers has actually grown since our first report in June 2020, warning that there was a crisis coming. The actual anti-vaxxers themselves, the key members of the anti-vax industry, they still have their platforms. So while they may be taken off one, they remain on the others. And the other thing is that when we do send them reports of misinformation, they fail to act against them. Across every single measure of what they're really doing, they're simply not doing their job. And the problem is that with vaccines, it's, we also have this problem with hate, with extremism. It's something you and I have discussed before. But with vaccines, it threatens the biosecurity of the United States. It threatens to take more lives than any violent extremist group. Because if we don't contain coronavirus, we already know that 500,000 have died and more still could die.
So given that many of these tech CEOs are going to be testifying in a congressional hearing on Thursday on the topic of misinformation, what are you hoping to hear from them?
Well, the tech CEOs have already said that they realize that there has to be reform. Look, they're trapped at the moment because the rules are so loose that actually it's an advantage to behave badly. You're able to gain more market share. And when you have good regulation, what that does is it provides a baseline from which people can operate. So you can have healthy competition, not destructive competition. So what we'd like to see is smart regulation, which is what we do with every industry. When it creates problems, even though there's a huge amount of good done by social media, and in the past year, look, we've all realized that one of the main ways in which we've shared information, love, succor with each other has been through social media. But at the same time, it's created these huge problems. It's time for us to regulate. I think there are numerous initiatives which are underway right now to bring forward legislation that would give a baseline of moral behavior for those social media platforms, and then allow for them to compete on a fair basis in the right way.
All right. Imran Ahmed, thank you.
My pleasure.